Welcome to the Audio Production Booth, an amazing resource for all students, faculty, and staff at the University of Miami. The purpose of this video is to introduce you to the hardware in the audio production booth, showing you how it works and how to set it up. The hardware setup inside the booth looks like this. Each piece of equipment serves an important purpose for audio production. We have an iMac, an audio interface, a condenser microphone, a pair of studio monitors, an external hard drive, and a MIDI controller. With these few pieces of hardware, we can accomplish what a major professional recording studio does on a smaller scale. Let's look at what each piece of hardware does to contribute to the production process. Let's begin with the microphone. The microphone is your primary way to get sound into the computer. The microphone in the audio production booth is an Avantone CK7 condenser microphone, and there are a few things you need to know about it. First off, let's look at the front of the microphone. The front is the side with the Avantone logo on it. Right above the logo, we have a switch with three options. Each of these symbols represents a polar pattern, or a pickup pattern, of the microphone. The polar pattern defines how the microphone responds to sound coming from different directions. To get a better idea of this, let's visualize these patterns from a bird's eye view of the microphone. Let's start with the first option, which is just a circle. We call this pattern omnidirectional, and it means the microphone will respond equally to sound coming from all directions. The next pattern is a bidirectional, or figure 8 pattern. When this pattern is selected, the microphone will be most sensitive to sounds coming from the front and back, and less sensitive to sounds coming from the sides. Finally, we have a cardioid pattern. The cardioid pattern will make the microphone most sensitive to sounds from the front and least sensitive to sounds from the back. So, which option should you choose? Well, it depends on what you're recording. The cardioid pattern is the most common. If you're just recording one sound source and you want to minimize reverb of the room, this is the option you want. If you're recording two sound sources at once, say two vocalists at the same time, you will want to opt for the bidirectional option and place each singer on opposite sides of the mic. If you want to pick up the whole ambience of the room you're in, you'll want the omnidirectional option. Omnidirectional is also useful when you have many people gathered around the microphone to record. Perhaps if you're recording gang vocals. If you turn the microphone around, you will see this switch. This allows you to turn on a high-pass filter. This will attenuate frequencies below 80 Hz in order to keep unwanted low frequencies from muddying your track. Unless you're miking kick drum or a bass, it's a good idea to turn the high-pass filter on, thus making your recordings as clean as possible. If you turn the microphone a bit more, you will notice this switch, a -10 dB pad. You can engage this switch when miking extremely loud sound sources to keep from overloading the electronics. The Avantone CK7 is a condenser microphone, and like all condenser microphones, it requires external power to work. In this case, the external power is provided by the audio interface. Let's take a look. This is the PreSonus Mobile 192 audio interface. Your microphone plugs in, via an XLR cable, into one of these two inputs on the interface. To send power to the microphone, you need to toggle on this 48V button for whichever input has a condenser microphone plugged in. This is called phantom power, and without it, your condenser microphone is not going to work. So, the Avantone is plugged into input 1. So I'm going to select input 1 on the interface and toggle on the 48V option to send power to the microphone. If you bring a dynamic or ribbon microphone to the audio production booth, make sure phantom power is turned off. Only condenser microphones require phantom power to work. Okay, let's take a closer look at the audio interface and see what it does and why it's important for our recording setup. An audio interface is a device that expands the sonic capabilities of a computer. It provides the ability to connect a variety of different input types, such as professional-level microphones, instruments, and other digital devices. When using an audio interface, it acts as your computer's sound card. Its internal circuitry is built with sound quality as a priority, so your recordings will be of higher quality than if you just use your computer's stock sound card. Let's discuss the features of this audio interface and how to work it. Right on the front here, we have two microphone inputs. As discussed earlier, you plug your microphone into one of these inputs via an XLR cable. These inputs are actually combo jacks, so you can also plug a 1/4-inch instrument cable into either input. Both inputs can be used at the same time, so if you wanted to record yourself, say, playing electric guitar and singing at the same time, you can do so. To the right of the inputs, we have the preamp controls. These allow you to adjust the gain and toggle phantom power for each input. You can select which input you want to adjust with these arrow buttons. Increasing the gain with this knob will increase the volume level of the sound you're recording. If you're talking into the microphone and it's barely picking up your voice, adjust your gain accordingly. You can monitor your sound levels over here, just to the right of the preamp panel. Make sure you never go into the red. This Q button switches which mix stream you're hearing, and you can adjust that in the Universal Control software. These two knobs over here adjust your output levels. The big knob is the volume control for the studio monitors, and the smaller knob is the volume control for your headphones. And of course, we have the power button here. If it's lit up blue, it means the audio interface is properly synced to the computer. If it's flashing red, it is not properly synced to the computer. If this happens, make sure everything is properly plugged in. You can also try turning the interface off and back on. If you need any extra 1/4-inch inputs, there are two more on the back of the interface, labeled 3 and 4. There are also additional outputs, so if you want to plug in more pairs of headphones, this is where you can do it. The studio monitors should always stay connected to the main output. To the left, we have some other advanced options for connecting and routing signals, word clock, SPDIF, and ADAT options. The audio interface is what converts the analog signal from the microphone and converts it to a digital signal. This allows the signal to be sent into the computer. The computer is the central component of the studio setup. It is here that you can edit and mix your recorded audio. But first, we need to make sure our audio interface is set up as our primary input and output source. To do this, navigate down to System Preferences on the dock. From here, click on Sound. You can now select the PreSonus 192 as your output and input. To make sure it's working, you can always go to YouTube to test the output and volume level. The iMac in the audio production booth is equipped with professional-level music software. Pro Tools, Logic Pro 10, Adobe Audition, and Ableton Live 10 Suite are all installed on this iMac and are available to you. These are called Digital Audio Workstations, or DAW for short. We've set the PreSonus interface as our input and output from our system preferences, but we may need to do the same thing within our chosen DAW. I'm not going to walk through the process of how to do this for every DAW on this computer, but within the Helpful Resources folder on the desktop, you can open up the User Manuals folder and select the PreSonus 192 Mobile Interface Manual. Section 3.3 of the manual has a guide for doing this that will be helpful. Also, feel free to look up any tutorials online. There are fantastic resources and guides for just about every software you want to learn. Now, let's talk about the keyboard in the audio production booth. This is an M-Audio Code 61 USB MIDI controller. A MIDI controller is a device that triggers MIDI data and sends it to your computer. The MIDI controller does not produce audio on its own. You must set up a virtual instrument within your DAW, which can then be controlled with the MIDI controller. If you're new to the concept of MIDI, check out my other video in the Helpful Resources folder called A Beginner's Guide to Understanding MIDI. If the MIDI controller is not turned on, the power button is on the back side, right here. Your DAW should recognize the controller when it's turned on. If, for some reason, it doesn't, you may need to set it up within your DAW. In the Helpful Resources folder on the computer, navigate to the folder called MIDI Controller DAW Setup. There are links to M-Audio's website that walk you through the process of setting up the MIDI controller in each DAW: Pro Tools, Logic Pro 10, and Ableton Live. Adobe Audition does not support MIDI, so if you want to record MIDI data, you need to use one of the other programs. The MIDI controller is a powerful tool with tons of different options. If you want to explore the more advanced features it offers, I encourage you to find some helpful resources online. This video is a good starting point. I've also put the link to this video in the Helpful Resources folder. Okay, let's briefly talk about the studio monitors. The audio production booth has a pair of PreSonus Eris studio monitors. This small circle should be emitting a blue light when the speakers are turned on. If you don't see that, the power button is on the very right side. The trickiest thing to understand about these monitors is the volume control. Remember that your main volume control is on the audio interface, this big knob. However, the studio monitors also have a volume control on the left side. I suggest turning up the volume on the monitors and then leaving it as is. That way you can use the knob on the audio interface as your primary volume control. If you bring an auxiliary cord to the audio production booth, you can plug in a phone or laptop as well. This is helpful if you have a song on your phone or laptop that you want to hear through professional-level studio monitors. Okay, now let's talk about saving your projects in the audio production booth. On the right side of the desk, you'll see the G Fusion external hard drive. This is a 3 terabyte hard drive where you can store your projects. If I open up the hard drive from the desktop, you'll see the names of everyone who has saved a project on the hard drive. This is to keep everyone's session organized. If you save your project on this computer, create a new folder under your name and save your project there. A couple disclaimers about saving to the hard drive. Number 1, this hard drive is going to be wiped at the end of every semester, so make sure you at some point copy your work to your own personal hard drive. You can plug in a flash drive or personal hard drive to this USB cord here. Disclaimer number 2. This is a community hard drive and everyone that uses the booth has access to it. That means anyone in the booth can access your saved files. It is possible that some anarchist could go in and delete everything on the hard drive. If we caught that person, they would of course be banned from using the audio production booth ever again. But you should understand the risk of not backing up your files on your own personal hard drive. When backing up your session files, make sure you give yourself enough time to do so. If you reserve the booth from 3 to 5 p.m., don't wait until 4:57 to start backing up your files. It can often take 10 minutes or more, depending on the size of your session folder. If someone has the booth reserved immediately after you, we will ask you to leave and come back at another time to back up your files. So there's the introduction to the audio production booth. I hope this has been a helpful guide to get you started.